The jungle had always sung with life. Leaves rustled like laughter, rivers danced through the valleys, and every tree stood like a pillar of harmony. But one year, everything changed. The clouds stopped visiting. The rivers ran dry. The songs of birds faded into silence. The once lush jungle turned into a canvas of cracks and dust. Thirst wasn't just a feeling now. It was fear. Fear that the jungle, the heart of all their lives, was dying. Animals who once roared proudly now walked with sunken eyes. Ponds became memories. Wells became holes. Hope was evaporating faster than the streams ever did. Even the mighty lion, king of the jungle, could no longer promise survival. The air was heavy, not just with heat, but with helplessness. And then, from the shadowed branches of a dry fig tree, rose a voice no one expected. Not a roar, not a growl, a caw. A single black crow, thin, quiet, often ignored by the mighty beasts, fluttered onto a rock and said, "If we can't find water, we must create a way to bring it here." The others scoffed. A crow? Saving the jungle? Absurd. But sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest courage. He didn't have strength like the elephants, speed like the cheetahs, or command like the lion, but he had something no one else dared hold on to anymore: belief. The crow didn't wait for applause. He didn't ask for permission. He just started searching, one stone, one drop, one idea at a time. And with that simple choice to act when others froze, the crow rewrote the destiny of the jungle. Because when everyone else gave up, he took flight. The sun burned mercilessly over the jungle, no longer a source of light and life, but a harsh reminder of the silence left behind by the missing rain. The trees, once proud in their green abundance, now stood as brittle skeletons, their leaves curled and brown. Cracks split the earth like scars. Ponds had become bowls of dust, rivers now winding trails of memory. Animals wandered not in search of food, but in desperate pursuit of water, their tongues dry, their eyes hollow. The mighty lion, king of the jungle, no longer roared. He sat under a dying tree, breathing heavily, watching the horizon as if it might offer some answer. The elephants moved slower with each passing day, their trunks dragging, their energy fading. Monkeys no longer chattered in the trees. Birds no longer sang. Silence had become the jungle's new language. And yet, amid this aching stillness, there was one creature that hadn't given up. A crow, black-feathered, lean, and underestimated. He was the kind of bird others barely noticed when times were good. But in this silence, his call carried farther than it ever had before. Each day, he flew across the cracked lands, not aimlessly, but with purpose. His wings cut through the heat like blades of determination. His sharp eyes scanned every corner, every forgotten ditch, every shadowed cave where water might still whisper its presence. He found nothing. For days, then weeks. But still he flew. One evening, as the sun hung low like a molten coin melting into the sky, the crow returned to the heart of the jungle, where the animals had gathered, faces drawn, limbs weak, hope thinning like vapor. The lion lifted his head slowly, eyes dull but still proud. The crow landed on a rock in the center and said, "If water will not come to us, then we must go to it. And if no path leads to water, then we must make one." Laughter, bitter and dry, echoed from the hyenas. The buffalo scoffed. Even the monkeys, too tired to swing, shook their heads. "You are just a crow," one leopard muttered. "What can you do that we cannot?" The crow did not argue. He simply turned and flew again. That night, the jungle was restless. The animals lay in silence, their ribs pressing against their skin with each breath. Somewhere in the darkness, a mother deer wept quietly for a calf, too weak to stand. And in the shadow of a rock, the crow sat awake, thinking, calculating, remembering. He remembered stories told by the elders, stories of deep stones placed in vessels, drops collected one by one. He remembered the way his own beak could carry pebbles, the way gravity could trick nature, the way air, water, and determination could work together. At dawn he moved, not with fanfare, not with followers, just quiet purpose. He found an old clay pot half buried near the edge of the jungle. Inside was a single drop of water, resting at the very bottom. It was useless to drink, unreachable. But not to him. He flew to a dry stream, picked up a stone with his beak, dropped it into the pot. The sound echoed, a tiny splash of hope. He did it again, and again, stone after stone, until, finally, the water rose high enough for him to drink. But he didn't drink it. He flew back to the lion. "I have found a way," he said. At first, no one followed him, but the youngest elephant, curious and hopeful, did. Then came a zebra, then a tortoise, then the lion, slow but watching. The crow led them to the pot. There, in the bottom, was proof that a problem was not the end, only the beginning of a new idea. With the help of many, more pots were brought. Small holes were dug, pebbles placed, leaves used as funnels. The crow taught them all how to use what they had forgotten. Ingenuity replaced panic. Collaboration replaced complaint. Every beak, every trunk, every paw played a role. Day by day, they began to collect and store water little by little. It wasn't a river. It wasn't a lake. But it was survival. And slowly, the jungle began to whisper again. The trees still looked weak, but they stood straighter. The animals still moved slowly, but they no longer collapsed. And the crow? He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't claim credit. He only flew higher, farther, scouting every morning, returning every night. Because somewhere along the way, he stopped being just a crow. He became a reminder. That courage is in the body. It's in the belief. That greatness doesn't shout. Sometimes it only calls. And that even in a world falling apart, one tiny spark of action can bring back the rain. The jungle never returned to its old self overnight. The rains did not come with grand trumpet, nor did the rivers roar back in rebellion. But something had changed, something deeper than clouds or soil. The animals had started working together. They no longer waited for miracles from the sky. They became the miracle themselves. The crow's quiet courage had awakened something that even the roar of the lion could not. Unity, understanding, purpose. Where once animals judged one another by size, strength, or voice, they now saw worth in effort, in ideas, in intention. The elephant, who once laughed at the crow's small wings, now gathered leaves every morning to help filter water. The cheetah, who once ran only for himself, now scouted distant spots for water pockets. Even the monkeys, who once mocked and played, now swung with pots tied to their backs, helping carry water to the young and the old. In the center of it all, the crow never took a throne. He never wore a crown of feathers or asked to be called a leader. He remained the same, humble, black-feathered, quietly determined. But where he walked, the animals followed, not because they were told, but because they believed. One evening, as the jungle glowed in the soft gold of sunset, the lion called the animals together. His mane, though thinner, still swayed like fire as he rose on a stone to speak. "This jungle," he said, "has always honored strength, but we mistook loudness for leadership. We waited for thunder to save us and ignored the quiet spark among us." He looked toward the crow. This bird did not wait. He did not blame. He did not fly away. He stayed. He acted, and because of him, we survive. The crow looked down shyly, but the jungle stood in stillness, not out of fear, but out of deep respect. "You showed us," the lion continued, "that even the smallest action, when done with heart, can move mountains, or in our case, refill rivers." A soft breeze passed through the clearing. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of reverence. The crow stepped forward. He did not clear his throat. He did not shout. He simply said, "I was just trying to help. I never thought I was saving anyone. I just couldn't sit and do nothing while everything around us was dying. If I had wings, I had to use them. If I had eyes, I had to see. If I had a beak, I had to carry what I could." And then he looked around. We all have something, no matter how small. And sometimes the smallest things save the biggest lives. A murmur moved through the crowd. Not noise, but agreement. A wave of realization. The tortoise whispered to the deer, "I always thought I was too slow to make a difference." The squirrel said, "I always thought my size meant I should stay out of the way." And the lion lowered his head slightly and said, I always believed strength meant never needing help. That day, the jungle learned the lesson it had ignored for generations. That true greatness is not in being above others, but in lifting others. That leadership is not in loud words, but in quiet action. That courage does not ask for attention. It simply moves. And above all, that no creature is too small to matter and no effort too small to count. In the weeks that followed, small ponds began to form where stones were stacked. Bamboo was used to guide rain when it returned. They built a system, not one made of technology, but of wisdom, teamwork, and empathy. The jungle became not only green again, it became kinder. Animals who once saw each other as rivals now greeted each other as family. They shared, they supported, and they remembered who had shown them the way. And though the crow still flew alone at times, he was never alone again. Every creature carried a little bit of his spirit now, because in the face of despair, he chose hope. In the shadow of drought, he chose effort. In a jungle that once worshipped strength, he reminded them of something far more powerful, the heart. And so, dear listener, if ever you think your ideas are too small, if ever the world tells you you're not enough, if ever the task seems too big for your wings to carry, remember the crow. Remember the silence he broke, the hope he planted, the jungle he revived. You don't need to roar to change the world. Sometimes, all you need is to care enough to act.